welcome Jigme Khyentse Rinpoche for this second day of the special 2-day teaching by Jigme Khyentse Rinpoche on translations and hosted by the Khyentse Vision Project. So we will start with the prayers, and after this I will hand over to Rinpoche. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha sublime, we seek refuge until awakening. By virtue of our giving and the like, may we awaken to benefit all. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha sublime, we seek refuge until awakening. By virtue of our giving and the like, may we awaken to benefit all. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha sublime, we seek refuge until awakening. By virtue of our giving and the like, may we awaken to benefit all. The blessing of Manjushri appearing as the emanation of Vimalamitra, the 13th rebirth of 𝘕𝘠𝘪𝘵, 𝘈𝘥𝘷𝘪𝘐𝑚𝑒𝑟, holder of the 7 special transmissions, Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, to you we pray. The earth is perfumed with scented water and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. Imagining this as the Buddha realm, I offer it, so that all beings may enjoy the pure realm. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalam Kam Niryatayami. In accordance with the capabilities and the diverse aspirations of sentient beings, I ask you to turn the wheel of Dharma of the greater, lesser, or conventional vehicles. And with this, I would like to request Rinpoche to please continue the teachings.
So, again, good afternoon to everyone online and offline. And just to remind you that we were discussing yesterday a text that was written by Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. A brief, and may say, account of what Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was or is. I think this was requested to him by someone, I suppose, one of his students, one of his disciples. And I was saying yesterday that this is really I suppose we could say it's like a CV of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. CV, and in other words, these days, I think it's called a profile on whatever social media you are, what is it, subscribed to the profile. And I have read the first page. It's actually until page 3, where he says, first it's sort of a brief profile, and then, as he says here, since my childhood, I have had admiration for monastic life. And then when I got a little older, I studied some of the fields of knowledge. I received the lineage of the 3 vows from more than 80 teachers of the Dharma, including my 23 sublime mentors, who have been especially kind to me. I drank the nectar of their profound and vast instructions on the Tripitaka and the 4 classes of tantras, never satisfied with that, never satisfied with what I have already, what received already, having examined their meaning to a certain extent. I adopted an attitude of not making long-term plans, knowing that the time of death is uncertain and everything is pointless. Thus, I laid the foundation for the path. So it's really explaining what the foundation of the path is for somebody like Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. And if we're interested in knowing what that is, it is so important for us to see what our foundation is. When he, let us say, you say posted your profile? When he posted his profile, what was the foundation? What was the motive behind? What was the impetus behind it? Now, if we want to, either we can just simply read this like we read any news or listen to any news, or we're listening to it in such a way that we might want to emulate it. A little bit like somebody who's going to a clothing shop and then trying it on. Do people do that still? Or do you have everything ordered online and then try it and then send it back? I think if that worked quickly, we would be doing that. I think it's only because of our impatience that shops are still possible. If Amazon delivered clothes in, let's say, in half an hour, I don't think we would be going to shops anymore, because it takes at least half an hour to go to the shops. Because first, before going to the shops, we have to, brush ourselves, polish ourselves, put the right shoe that goes with the right underwear, with the right trousers, with the right skirt. By the time we get to the shops, it's probably already 2 hours. So if Amazon delivered in half an hour, I don't think we'd be going to any shops. But then if we did do that, then what's the use of clothes? Nobody's going to see what we wear, so what does it really matter? So anyway, here, when we go to the shops, what is our real motive? What is the foundation on which we go to the shops? What is the foundation on which we Probably the reason why we go to the shops is so that we can get something to wear, so that we can take a photo, so that we can post ourselves. Although even that, I think these days is not necessary, is that you can just have fake clothes. Like yesterday, I made the mistake of leaving my own, what is it called, background, and then Donna didn't get to show off her bird float things behind. So we can do that too. So anyway, what is the foundation for the path for us? One might think, why do Buddhists make it so complicated? Why can't we just get on, with it and say the things? Well, that is really important here. That is why yesterday we concluded with, what was it? Something prickly. What is it? Prickly, jittery, flickering, fluttering. What was it? Quivering. Shattering thing that drives us. And that is something that we are helplessly trying to not feel. We would rather have some fluttering rather than chattering. But then if we get some fluttering, then we are looking for the next fluttering, because what happens if the first fluttering stops? Then even that is not enough. You have to cover that up. So that is the reason why, at least I think that's the reason why we do anything. Whatever it is, we do things because this is something that is driving us, something that is burning. And I think as this is just my own imagination, maybe it's just a fantasy, but I think children, babies, when they feel that, they do feel that. When they feel that, most of the time, ourselves as babies, we're frustrated. And what do? We scream. We make noise so that it actually triggers the jittery feeling of our parents who can't stop. And then what do? They shove something up our mouth so that we can't scream, so that we can get distracted by something, whether it is sensations, taste. And then what happens? Well, after a while, we grow out of it. We can't go around as adults wanting that. So then, before then, it has been, upgraded to other things like chewing or sucking on a blanket, an old, raggedy blanket or handkerchief, which I suppose does the job for a while, but then it doesn't quite completely cover it up. Then what do? Then
we start talking.
We are taught more sophisticated ways of creating a ragged blanket into something else. That's why we're sent to kindergarten, so that we can develop a slightly more sophisticated way. We have learned that. And then after kindergarten, what is it? What?
Primary.
Primary school. Then we learn a little bit more sophisticated way of finding some coping mechanism, or what is it called, that thing you put in the mouth? Dummy, more sophisticated dummy. And then that sophisticated dummy, after primary school, it is outdated, so updated to something else. And in between, well, you learn to, because you feel that uncomfortable feeling, you learn to trigger that in others. Sometimes it's called befriending others, or sometimes it's called, bullying others. It's just simply the same thing, being bullied or bullying others. It's just a way of covering up that thing. And then after primary school, what is the next? High school? Well, then you learn a little bit more. Along with it, then you learn many other things. Having partners, boyfriends, girlfriends, and then everything actually that we keep. And then it's university. Then you have to, specialize in something that covers this thing up. And then after that, it becomes a profession. Then after that, well, then after some time of that profession, then you look forward to something called retiring. Which once you have retired, then what do? You can't just retire, because our dummy hasn't yet become sophisticated enough. So then we are officially retired, but we still keep doing things. And as long as that hasn't changed, the foundation hasn't changed. That foundation is not the foundations that Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was talking about. So whatever it is, whether we, as a retiree, don't feel that we are as useful anymore, or that we are not as productive anymore, but we would like to be. We have been, but we still want to be. Whether it is that, or some of us work, are professional, and we want to be known, successful, powerful, rich. I wonder how many rich people there are that feel they are original. I wonder how many well-known people there are that feel that they are well-known enough. Still doesn't seem to be enough. There still seems to be something we're chasing. From that point of view,
就是那个面霜。
I wonder, are we any different from cats? No, cats, if they have something hanging, they will chase it everywhere, anywhere. As long as there's something to chase, they will chase it. And as humans, what difference is there between a cat chasing a furry thing dangling in front of us and us human beings chasing those things? Now, to a certain extent, we don't have much choice. We need to have a roof over ourselves. We need to eat. But after a certain point, is there any difference between that and a cat? Or even a dog? When you throw a stone at a dog, it seems to be that you don't have to teach dogs to follow a stone or a stick. Any dog, they all seem to understand the same language. You throw it, they catch it, and bring it back to you. And us human beings are actually chasing it. I think the difference is that for us, it could actually be worse. We have been thrown this bone since a very long time, and we're still chasing it. Even as an old person with crutches, we're still chasing something. Since morning till evening, we're chasing it. And all of those things that we do are simply on one foundation, just this jitteriness, wanting to cover it up, wanting to not feel it. It's really as if our behind was on fire. It's constantly. So, yesterday, I was saying that in terms of that, we follow certain things, and some of those things, some of those dummies have a certain short-term expiry date. And some of them have slightly longer expiry date. And it's in those terms that when we examine it a little bit more, in many traditions, not just Buddhist traditions, whether it is Asian traditions or Western traditions, philosophical traditions and religious traditions, when we engage in a little bit more introspection, when we're not happy with the short expiry date dummies, then we look for a slightly longer expiry date dummy, or if possible, with no expiry date. But whatever it is it that or not, is something we have to really check. So this introspection that we do requires some honesty. It requires some courage to realize that the dummy that I have been using so far is not effective. Like when I get annoyed, getting angry, getting triggered, when I want something, becoming obsessed by something and chasing it. That is a solution that we all look for usually, but they have longer or shorter, what is it called, used by date. So these ones, because actually all of us don't want to feel this discomfort. The dummy is supposed to make us feel good. So whether we get obsessed by something or addicted to something, whether it is getting addicted to play, to toys, and then when we become adult, games, and then what? Betting on games that brings a certain thing. These are just addictions, more part of our attachment. And some of us have the ability to realize that that isn't quite working. We have that. And then sometimes some of us, when we can't deal with something, we get angry easily. We get easily triggered. These days, we get triggered so easily. Sometimes we even get triggered for others. I don't know whether that is helpful or not, but we do. When we get triggered, the feeling of getting triggered momentarily numbs what we were trying to escape. And then we feel that that is actually a good thing. What is it called? It gives to the brain some kind of that adrenaline gives you a what? What? Dopamine rush. And then we get addicted to it. We're chasing it. And then when that doesn't work, we get so upset. We become a tyrant, tyrannical. And then, I don't know whether it is kindly or very selfishly, we share that with everyone. Either we're very honest and kind and we're sharing our addiction and temper with everyone, or we are creating havoc not only in ourselves and others. When we recognize that, realize that, if we have some maturity, if we live in a world where we can realize that that is not something we want to follow, then there's some possibility. But these days, the entire world has just become, you call it a fertile ground for that. But if you are not tyrannical, and if you're not a drama king or queen, then you're not normal. That's why if somebody wins something, what do they have to do? They have to scream, shout, jump. And if they don't win something, they also have to do the same thing. Bang their hand on the table. This is called, wasn't it? Is it expressing? Being appreciative if somebody gives you something. If somebody gives you something that you don't have, what do? We are so happy. The first time I saw that, it was in Darjeeling. An Englishman came to see my father, and I thought he was crazy. When he saw my father, he was very emotional, and he would jump. He had a hair like this. He would jump and scream and, what do you call it? Shake for about 5 minutes. I was so surprised. And then every time he came to see my father, I used to brace myself for this new world. This is something that is so prevalent these days. If you watch any of these TV shows where they, what is it, millionaire thing, when they win, the TV personality looks at the person and thinks, saying, are you going to jump? Please jump. Because we need people to think that you're jumping. That has become our norm. So when that is the norm, it's very difficult for us to have any introspection and think, this is actually crazy. Mad. So this kind of behavior makes so that we don't have much possibility of introspection because it has become the norm. These days, being a little bit rude, labeled as outrageous, is the norm. You have to be. If not, you're abnormal. Being a little bit discreet is almost as if it's something embarrassing, dirty. So the problem with this is that when this is so, this has become our world. In fact, is there any difference between how a chimpanzee shrieks when they are happy and when they're unhappy? Us human beings have managed to mimic that. If you take something from the chimpanzee's hand, they will scream, show their mouth, their lips. And human beings, we have got to that. And we do that because that for a moment covers up something, covers up this discomfort. This behavior doesn't allow us to have any introspection. If you look back, does it help? How long is this dopamine rush going to last? Then actually we're going to end up one day having to bounce every few seconds. Be happy every few seconds. And if that is not enough, recreate that, jump around again, or eat something, or listen to somebody saying something nice about you, and then keep doing that again and again and again. And after a while, what happens? It doesn't work anymore. You have to make the sounds louder, the colors brighter, the jumping bigger. I'm wondering if in 10 years, you're going to have bungee jumping ropes in the television place where people are happy. The higher they jump, the happier they are. There is no end to it. One day, these bungee jumpings will have to go beyond the stratosphere because it's not enough. What can we do? What do we do? So, according to the wisdom traditions of the past, whether it is in Asia or the West, people have had come to their senses a little bit and realized that that is too short. So therefore, they try to work with these emotions, these reactions to this itchiness, to this jitteriness, and then make choices, whether it is physical, verbal, or mental way of relating to things. They realized that certain things were not conducive to sanity and certain things were more conducive. So then they developed discipline of the body, speech, and mind in order to create a slightly longer use by date rather than lacking discipline. Developing discipline brings a little bit more order, brings a little bit more ability to deal with this quiverings, this discomfort, uncomfortable thing. In fact, we all do this out of self-preservation, but none of it that we have been using so far has really help us find a lasting, self-preserving thing. So, as far as that kind of tradition is concerned, in all traditions, Buddhist traditions, and all the other different traditions in India, in the West. That's why in so many traditions there are people who sort of distance from themselves from this kind of influence and this kind of relating to things that I have just been mentioning, this jumping, screaming, short dopamine rush that we're looking for. And so to do that, what did they have to do? They had to take themselves away from this group of mad, crazy people who are jumping around all the time. And it has been termed living in a secluded place, but it actually is living in a safe place where you are not surrounded by mad people. Have you heard of this story? This story is taught in many Buddhist teachings. It's said that there was this country a long time ago somewhere, and this king was talking with this astrologer. And this astrologer said he did some charts for the kingdom, and he said to the king, there's going to be some bad weather, some rain, and it is going to be a toxic rain. So in, I think, a week or 10 days, there's going to be this rain. So he said to the king, please cover all your water sources. Unfortunately, this news didn't get to the whole country. So the kings and around his place, all the water sources were covered. So this toxic rain didn't get there. Unfortunately, most of the people, their water was completely polluted by this toxic thing. So slowly, after a month or so, everyone else started to go crazy. And the king and his people didn't. And then the king couldn't rule them. So what did he have to do? He couldn't rule. They all thought that the king was crazy. Imagine living in a country where everyone is stoned and you are the only one that is not stoned. One day, if you want to live in that world, you'll have to be stoned. So the king decided that there was no way of being a ruler unless he could communicate with them. So he went there and took their water, and he became crazy. And then they lived, what is it called? Crazily ever after. So the reason why there were these secluded places in the past, the solitary places people went to, it was actually more for safety, for sanity, rather than anything else. These days, we think that people who went into these secluded places were sort of strange. But actually, not only in the spiritual traditions, even in the laboratories, the scientists, don't they have their room locked, closed, and nobody disturb them so that they can do their research? We don't call them crazy. So actually, this is what happened. That's where these traditions, where people went and actually trained their mind in order to be able to relate to their own inner jitteriness in a little bit more sane way. As far as that is concerned, all traditions are very similar. That's why, most traditions try to not harm others. At least they're meant to not harm others, and then try to benefit others. Basically, favoring more positive emotions and refraining from negative emotions. as far as it is concerned, all traditions are very similar. And then, specific to what Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was talking about, specific to the Buddhist tradition. For example, in the Buddha's time, there were many followers of the Buddha who just did this, who created a little bit more sane environment, following that kind of conduct. Then they lived their lives having the Buddha as their influencer, as their teacher, as their guide. In fact, some of the students of the Buddha some of them were, kings, merchants, artisans. Actually, some of them were even soldiers. Some of them even were butchers, hunters. They still follow the Buddha's teachings, especially the butchers. There's nothing that says you being a butcher, you're not allowed to appreciate what the Buddha taught or to be inspired by the Buddha. So they were. But because of their livelihood, they couldn't completely stop. Especially at that time, it wasn't that easy to change jobs, to go from one thing to another. You couldn't be a murderer and then suddenly become a doctor, criminal and suddenly become a judge. These days, there is a little bit more freedom. These days, actually, you can be both at the same time. But anyway, at that time, it wasn't that easy. So some of these butchers, when they received the teachings of the Buddha, they decided that at least some of these butchers said, okay, I'm going to follow what the Buddha taught. I can't completely not kill, but I will never kill after sunset. So from sunset to sunrise, they didn't kill. They reduced their negative actions. Thieves as well. Some of them, I think, promised that they wouldn't steal at night, only in the daytime. Some of them only in the daytime, not at night. Some of them made promises that they would not do that in certain areas. So all of that is possible. In fact, the way we follow the Buddha's teachings, it doesn't mean that there is any restrictions as to who is allowed or not allowed. Everyone is welcome. Everyone can follow the Buddha's teachings. That doesn't mean that they're all perfect. Nor are we. We might think we are actually perfect students, followers of the Buddha. But if we look carefully, a little bit deeper, well, I think we're just as outrageous as anyone else. So anyway, there were these people. But not everyone was like that. Some of them were kings. At that time, some of the kings, I don't think, took the vow to not kill. They probably took the vow to help people. But I think at that time, capital punishment wasn't as badly looked down on. It was probably part of society. So some of them did do that. But that doesn't mean that they can't follow the teachings. That doesn't mean that they're not allowed to appreciate it. Just like many of us, we have no idea what nuclear energy is. But many of us appreciate the electricity that comes from it. We have no idea how to make electricity, but we can press it and we appreciate it. So there's many students like that in the Buddha's time who followed the Buddha. The result of that kind of action is, from the Buddhist point of view, not Buddhahood. The result of that action is whatever that action is based on, whatever the ground is. If you want to be a little bit happier, if you want your happiness to have a little bit longer expiry date, then you can choose different things. If you want to have a short expiry date, then you choose different things, like buying a chillum or sniffing something. That's a very short expiry date. That's just, very realistic cause and effect. So, but then that was not all there was. There were some students of the Buddha who were philosophers. Some of them were not happy with that. They wanted more. They wanted more thorough understanding of what makes the Buddha, what makes the Buddha's path, Buddha's teachings, what it is. So then, for them, they were not happy with that kind of, longer, what is that thing called? Dopamine. What is it? Hit. They wanted a much longer dopamine hit. So, for that, then you have to do further investigation. It's not enough to know that there is an itch and to scratch it, or don't scratch it and put a cream. Then you might actually need to do further tests and realize that maybe it's a soap that you're using, soap that you love to use because it smells good. You might have to give up using that soap, or a certain food that you take. You might have to change your diet. So that kind of investigation is what another type of students of the Buddha were doing. Those were a little bit, those were the ones who became monks, nuns, went into the forest, meditated a bit longer. Then actually there's one student of the Buddha, I have to tell you this story. It was one of his relatives. He was a very, very, I think, he really appreciated female beauty. Have you heard his name? Nanda. And he was, suppose we could say he was addicted to being in love. So the Buddha and him were quite close before. And the Buddha had a reputation that whenever people went to meet him, people were quite changed after meeting him. So one day, while he was with should we say, frolicking, he heard that the Buddha had come to his door, and his partners told him, be careful, if you go and see him, you won't come back. And he said, no, I can't not go, because he's an elder and he's also prince. So he, out of respect for tradition, he said, I have to go. So one of his partners put their saliva on his forehead and said, you better come back before this dries. So when he went there, he saw the Buddha, and the Buddha talked to him and said, should we go for a walk? Catch up. I think these days what he says. He said, let's catch up. So he did. He went for a walk. So as he went for a walk, after some time, they found themselves close to the forest. And then they walked in the forest. And one of their conversations was drawn by a monkey. hanging on the branches. And then he was just talking about his girlfriend at that time. And he was saying how beautiful and how marvelous she was. And the Buddha said, is she as marvelous as that one? Was a female monkey. He said, there is no way she is so much, billion times more beautiful than that monkey up there. Then they walked further and further and further. And then, miraculously, the Buddha had taken him to one of the God realms. It's called, I think, God realm of the 33. And there, when he got there, he said, this is a place I've never been to. The Buddha told him, you go and visit, I have some things to do. So he went and visited. He was curious. He saw that there were so many beautiful things. And when he went there, he saw this beautiful hall or palace. And there were so many people, all young and voluptuous, good looking. And they were all almost in a hurry preparing. And you say, well, what are you preparing for? They said, oh, we're preparing for the Buddha's relative called Nanda. He's going to become a monk soon. And when he becomes a monk, after he dies, he's going to come here. Then he really got so excited. And he went straight back to the Buddha and said, please make me a monk. And he said, why? He said, I want to be born there. He said, why? She said, they are so voluptuous, so beautiful. I've never seen something like that in my life ever. He said, how did they compare to your girlfriend? That compared to them, it's really like comparing my girlfriend to the monkey. My girlfriend is like the monkey compared to these goddesses. So he kept on pestering the Buddha, saying, please, please, please make me a monk. I want to be a monk. So when the Buddha came back to India, he insisted, and then he said, okay, you can become a monk. But the Buddha told all the other monks, you be careful, because he wants to become a monk for a different reason, different foundation than you. So all of these monks were also afraid. They didn't want to get influenced by his conversations. So after a while, he felt that wherever he went, everyone sort of ran away from him because they didn't want to be influenced by him. So then again, he was sitting so sad. And then the Buddha went to him and said, why are you so sad? He said, nobody wants to talk to me. He said, I'm so dejected, so sad. He said, okay, let's go for a walk. Then again, he took him on another trip. This time he took him on a trip. And this trip happened to be a hellish experience. There was again, when the Buddha was visiting that place, there was this big cauldron where there was some really frightening cooks preparing the pot. And he asked them, what are you doing? He said, oh, this is for Nanda. He's going to be born. At the moment, he's a monk. He's going to become born in the God realm. And after a few aeons, when that particular positive action has exhausted, his past other negative actions of his attachment, anger, pride will arise in this experience for him. So we're preparing for him. So then he went back to the Buddha and said, now, make me a monk again. I don't want to be born in the God realm. I don't want to be born anywhere there. I want to be free from this. This was his itch. This was his attempt to find a long-lasting dopamine. So then he decided, I don't want any of them. And he faced the itch, the pain directly, instead of running away from it all the time. He started to learn to be with it. And from that moment on, whatever meditation or practice he did was not to cover it up, but to actually face it, to not run away from it, but to actually see what is the real cause of it. At that time, then he started to question not only the itch, the scratch, not only the itchiness, not only the quiveriness, but who he was. He had the honesty, the courage, or rather, he was petrified of being fake, petrified of always running away. And he really faced his quiverings. What is it? A little bit like for us, when we have to get up early to do something, how do we relate to the alarm clock? The alarm clock is not at fault, but we do feel somehow traumatized by the alarm clock. We don't like it. The sound, something that wakes us up. Like when we were told by our parents, it's time to study, do your homework. That feeling, or when you're taken to school, for example, even now, when I hear certain film musics from India, I used to really have the same feeling I used to have when I didn't want to go to school and I had to go to school. Certain Hindi Bollywood movies, they used to be playing it very loudly in the morning when I went to school. Now it's not the fault of Bollywood, but it's just me who associated it with that. Just like alarm clock. When we feel this discomfort, we have never learned to work with it. We have always learned to not face it. Since our childhood, and many times even our spiritual path has been something to cover that up. Just like Nanda was covering it up. So the fear of that discomfort that we feel, the fear in itself, is it bad? Should we not feel it? Is fear bad, actually? What do you think? Nobody wants fear, but is it bad? If it was possible to remove the sensitivity to fear, would that be good? Would that be sane? Would that be healthy? For example, if we just amputated, lobotomized just that part of being afraid, if we removed it, what would happen? We would drive and just drive into everything. We would go to a cliff and jump because there's no fear. The fear itself is nothing bad. The fear is a symptom of something that we have not addressed, something that we have ignored, something that we are ignorant, the unknown. Now, that thing that we're ignorant of, what could that be? First, fear might not be that bad. But when we experience fear, pain, anxiety, panic, they're all bundled up in one thing. And then at that time, what are we protecting ourselves from? Especially the language that we use, especially the English language. How do you express fear? How do you say that? We say, I am afraid. Isn't that a correct English word? I am afraid. Basically, we're identifying with fear. It's akin to saying, I am fear. I am afraid. I am fear. So does that mean that we should avoid ourselves? Isn't that what we've been doing? Or is that what we've been doing? Avoiding ourselves, yet wanting to find ourselves? Don't we travel to the end of the earth to find ourselves? You buy backpacks, go on adventures to find yourself. But at the same time, we don't want. In fact, pain, anxiety, fear, this jitteriness, it is somehow our identity. Even though you put that nice profile on your social media, if you look properly behind the eyes, I'm sure we can detect some fear behind it, some anxiety. That is our identity at the moment. I'm not saying that we are, but that is how we identify ourselves. So are we trying to escape ourselves and preserve ourselves at the same time? Wouldn't that be crazy if that were true? But is it? Are we always trying to run away from ourselves? At the same time, preserve ourselves? Trying to escape oneself while building oneself, while completely oblivious to any need to face or wonder, actually, if our whole coping mechanism is nothing but a sham. So that is what I think the Buddha invited his relative to do that introspection, facing it and changing in order to change one's relationship with that which we are trying to avoid, that monster-like side, the thing that we're trying to avoid, that we are oblivious to. Or are we oblivious, or are we willfully ignorant of it? That is a question that we need to ask. Basically, our unchecked ego experience might it just be simple mask? If that were the case, would it be terrifying and freeing at the same time? That's a question that we really need to address. That is the foundation that Khyentse Wangpo is talking about. Because without that, whatever path we follow, whatever we do, is not much more than theatrics. We're an actor. So the coping mechanism that we are using of escaping is also possibly a mask, just a masquerade. So first we need to encourage ourselves to have that honesty, to look into it, to have some introspection, and as to what it is that we're trying to do, what we are. What happens when we do that? If we haven't been doing it long, if it's the first time we're doing it, it's going to be uncomfortable. That discomfort, is it something good or bad? Or isn't it just something very normal? Whenever you do something that you haven't done before, it's going to be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable doesn't mean bad or good. It just means we're not used to doing it. Sometimes when we do this kind of introspection, we might feel some relief. Sometimes when we do it, it's uncomfortable. But underlying that is that ideally what we want is eternal happiness without doing much. And no pain regardless of what I do. That is what we want. That thing, if we look at it, is that an intelligent question and answer? I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't try that, but haven't we been trying it? I'm not saying that you should completely write that off, but how about something else? Because when we reach this discomfort of relating to this uncomfortable situation, all our, squeaky, screaming, tyrannical, immature character comes up. It's not working. I don't want this. How is this possible? Why me? Why not? Etc., etc., etc. I think I should just leave dashes there and everybody can put in their own words to that. All of this will happen. That is just the spoiled brat not getting their way. And spoiled brats, when they don't get their way, what do we do? As adults, what do? We buy them off. We give them attention. And as long as they get attention, then they might shut up for a while. But then we are slaves of that kind of spoiled brat. They will manipulate heaven and earth in order to get our attention. Our mind will do that, and it has been doing it. So I think sometimes when that arises, we should learn to say, so what? I don't like this. So what? I didn't sleep well last night. So what? And then once in a while, if you're in the privacy of your own room, tell yourself, up yours. Whatever things you want to say, because this spoiled brat has been tyrannizing me since I can remember. And it has got my attention far too much. I'm not saying ignore it. You know, I was quite a demanding child when I was a young child. I suppose, like most children, I liked toys. Not necessarily good toys, but any toys. And there used to be these people, I think even in the West there is these balloons that they make animals out of. There used to be this person who had this long post of a stick and then few balloons attached to it. And then he would make things like dogs and people out of it. And then he used to go just by our window and rubbing this balloon against each other. And then I asked my mother, can I have one? And first she asked him, how much is it? It was 50 paisa. But in those times, 50 paisa wasn't that little. So she said, no, it's too much. You're not getting it. Then I think he heard me asking my mother for it again. So he went round that by our window for about an hour, but my mother didn't give in. I said, I want that. She said, no, you're not getting it. I kept following her. I said, please, can I have one? I will study well. She said, no, you're not getting it. After a while, she would just say, no, no, no. She didn't lift her voice. She didn't act as if, I was the only person. She was just completely normal, as if she was just talking naturally to somebody. She just said, no, no, it's too much. You're not getting it. She talked to me as if I was an adult, but at the same time, she didn't give in. So for me, this is really how I need to deal with this spoiled brat. Because if I shout at it, it's not going to work. If I shout at it, then I'm going to get into a fight with that spoiled brat, and that's giving too much attention to the spoiled brat. So I don't remember. My father gave me a toy once. I don't remember my mother giving me any toy. she really, really resisted that. When I became an adult, once in a while, she would give some presents. But as a child, she never gave me any toys. So, see, for us, when this jittery feeling happens, we want to not have it. We want to have, we don't want it to control me, so I want to control it. That controlling part is, I think, a wish to control it. And not being able to control it is the most annoying thing. It's always there. It's nagging me all the time. So the first thing we try to do is not letting us be pulled by it. That, in the usual Buddhist tradition, it's called shamatha. You have heard of something called shamatha, haven't you? Shamatha is really about not giving in to the grubby, spoiled brat. Just letting it be, letting it be. And then, eventually, when our mind becomes a little bit more mature, so that it can actually develop some insight into more subtle ways of our mind, including itself, what it is, how it is. For example, ourselves. What are we? Each of us have our own profile that we are so holding on to. What is it actually? Do your profiles on your social media change or not? Usually it changes backwards, isn't it? You try to put pictures of yourself as a child or as a teenager rather than going forward. So if we can develop, once the mind becomes a little bit more mature, then it can develop some insight into what it actually is. What is our identity? What is our profile? We might realize that our profile or our identity is not as fixed as we think it is. That actually, when the Buddha said all compounded things are impermanent, that it might be something that we have to acknowledge. And then the second seal, I should say, all masks are pain. Usually it's said all emotions are pain, but all escapism are pain, will always lead to getting caught. And that maybe this identity of ours that we have been projecting this profile that we have been projecting might not be all that we have been making it out to be. Everything that we are actually projecting there might actually be bogus. But these require much more introspection, more time. If we're able to do that, if we can develop that kind of courage, introspection, and develop some insight into it, and then your references will change. Your values will change. Until that changes, until you notice that our usual references are not helpful to becoming able to have a long-lasting or a complete freedom from the expiry date. Because all our present references are just that, based on short-term dopamine rush, or maybe a lifelong dopamine rush. That reference is not valid for a longer-term relation with this jitteriness. So that's why then okay, now I'll read from yesterday's text for a while. Thus I laid the foundation of the path. Concerning the vows of individual liberation, I abandoned 5 things of 4 root downfalls and carelessly drinking. For the Bodhisattva vows, I obtained carelessly drinking beer. I wonder if this was translated for Australia. I suppose in Tibet it's called chang, but chang is a general thing for all everything, I think, ranging from spirits to wine or beer. Any alcohol is part of this, but where the translator must have catered this to Australia, and filled my mind only with altruism. Concerning the vow of secret mantra, I wholeheartedly abandoned the wrong view of disparaging the sublime masters, even my dreams, and trained in a pure perception of the best of my ability. For these reasons, my root commitment to the 3 vows have remained unblemished. I have tried to confess any violations of the minor branch commitments and vowed not to repeat them. I never listen to the words of anyone who have any bias in favor of those who are very close to me or against those who harbor a strong hostility towards me. Therefore, even though I may not have benefited the teachings and sentient beings, that is acceptable, since I did not cause them much harm either. Wherever I stay, my mind is at ease and I'm happy. This is a story of how I found realization and of what I presume to be my virtue so far. Basically, he's saying, this is my CV, this is my profile. What will happen in the future depends on the compassion of the masters and the 3 jewels. Apart from them, I do not place my hopes and fears on anyone else. You too have obtained for once this human existence with its freedoms and advantages, which is so hard to find and of great benefit. There is no certainty as to when death will strike. When it strikes, nothing but Dharma will be of benefit. That is certain. Therefore, mindful of the fact that the time of death is uncertain, keep the root commitments of the 3 vows mentioned above, even at the risk of your own life. So here, you too have obtained for once this human existence with its freedoms and advantages, this is the change of values, human values, that is necessary in terms of somebody like Jigme Khyentse Wangpo, who wants to relate to this, relate to this quiveriness in a longer lasting way, or in such a way that one is never disturbed by this quiveriness. For that, our values have to change. As he's saying here, you too have obtained for once this human existence with its freedoms and advantages. Of course, what these freedoms and advantages are, you can check in the texts. It is usually the freedoms are condensed into 8 freedoms and 10 advantages. Sometimes these freedoms can be more detailed into more, but those are things you can find in the texts. But the idea here is that when we say human life, for each person, human life has different meanings to us. And these meanings, if we can understand them in a little bit more detail, then we will notice that these values, these ways of valuing it, contribute to different things in our life. And a lot is lost in translation. For example, just using the word precious. When he's saying here, it is so hard to find and of great benefit this human life. What's the meaning of fair skin?
Fair skin.
Yes.
Fair skin.
What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean when you say fair skin, light colored? That is the most misunderstood word. As I was growing up reading in the newspapers in India, there used to be matrimonials where they say so and so can speak English, has English, what do you call it? This kind of degrees. What? Fluency, has studied this, has gotten BA and MA of this, and fair skin. Now, if it was in Europe, where everyone don't want fair skin, that's why they bake themselves in sun and get their skin so burnt that when they're 50 years old, they look like they're just sort of, what do you call it? Free. Yes, that kind of skin. So similar to that, the reference of fairness is so different. Likewise, what is important, what kind of foundation is necessary is so different, like the relative of the Buddha. When he took his vows first, or his idea of beauty, or his idea of why he wanted to become a monk was completely different. Similarly, here, as Khyentse Wangpo was saying here, that this human life is of great benefit. Why? Because we can deal with this jitteriness once and for all. Because we have the ability to think, to investigate. We have the intelligence to do it. And not only that, right now, I'm in a human condition where I can have relative comfort to be able to investigate. At the same time, relative discomfort to want to be free from it. So it's a really special condition, this human condition. Not only that, I have the intelligence, I have the open-mindedness. That is one kind of foundation that he's talking about. Basically, I think many of you know when we talk about the preliminaries, the preparations, we talk about something called the four thoughts, which is precious human life, impermanence, law of cause and effect, and suffering of samsara that we need to contemplate, we need to know about. For example, the contemplation on precious human life is about upgrading our values, upgrading our bad values, not sort of dismissing anything, but upgrading our values. Based on our path, we have to change. As we, for example, as we go from one floor to the other, our view changes. What we use, what we need, will also change. And then the next part, which is, as he's talking about it here, there is no certainty as to when death will strike, meaning that this opportunity that we have is not something that is to be taken for granted. It can change any moment. Right now, at the moment, I might have that ability to think. But who knows when I will get, what is it called? Dementia. When will I be able to think of it? Who knows when I'll be completely obsessed by an emotion where I can't think at all. So whenever we have some moment, we really need to treasure that, valuing that to the point that that becomes something that I treasure. That's why it's called contemplating precious human life. Those moments where our mind is somewhat able to have insight, somewhat wanting to have insight, somewhat open to actually being honest with oneself. Those moments are something we need to treasure. Those are precious. And then we need to make sure that those moments happen often. Ideally, on the path that Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was talking about, that should be the norm. That the precious human life with the 8 freedoms and 10 advantages are values or are valued by us at all times. Just like somebody who's, for example, there may be a trader on stock market. Whenever there's any trend changing, they need to be aware. Likewise for us on the path, whenever there's any fluctuation in those values, we need to be able to notice it so that there is a steady foundation of that. And then once we're on this path, our relation to time has to change. How do we relate to time right now? You might want to go into Einstein's theory, etc., etc. But none of those really help in this case. The only way we relate to time is impermanent. That's all. We need to know when somebody says, "Do you have time?" What does that mean? What does it actually mean? Where do you have that? In your pocket? Somewhere else? In the safe? Where is it? And when you say, "What time is it?" we even know that right now. What time is it? Precisely what time is it? If I ask you, what time is it? It is. You might say it is 16:55, then how many seconds? But every time is changing. By the time you've told me it is that time, it is no more that time. So from the point of view of somebody who is working with their mind, then we have to relate to time in a different way. The sanest way of relating to time is, at this point, impermanent and eventually relative. Anything other than that is just another theatrical, another story that we're telling ourselves. And then also how we relate to space has to change if we're on the path. How do we relate to space? Please contemplate. How do you relate to space? Now, when I say space, I'm not talking about space beyond there. Space in our mind where we are projecting ourselves, where we would like to be. What are we fantasizing? The place we're staying, place where we would like to be, that is space. That's what we're relating to. That's how we are projecting ourselves, how we are actually wanting to be. Basically, it's the world that we want to be in. And what is that? That is just this world. And included in that is this quiveriness. So we are projecting ourselves into a space where there is no quivering, jittering, itchy thing. There's only scratches, a pleasant kind of scratches that we would like. Do you understand what I mean? You know, when it's so itchy and you're scratching and it's so pleasant, you would like to have the scratching but no itches. But isn't that silly? How would you scratch if there's no itch? But anyway, there is that. We would like to only have scratches, no itches. That is the world that we're building, we are fantasizing about. From the Buddhist point of view, that is, that's part of samsara, what we call samsara, cycle of existence. We are projecting ourselves into that. But what is that? In terms of the Four Noble Truths, that's called truth of suffering. See, according to the Buddhist teachings, suffering is described in three ways: pain, pleasure, and neutral experiences. Pain, we all agree, is suffering. And then scratching. That we usually call happiness. But actually, after a while, if you scratch too much, it's going to be painful. From the Buddhist point of view, that happiness that we all manage to get occasionally, and some seem to have it more long-term, is called suffering of change, meaning that it will eventually come. Some of you are young and you can get up and sit down easily, but just wait a few decades. You will get up and get down with more creakiness. You will have to go to the, what is it called? The mechanics and inject some things in your knees so that you can do that for a while. Or you will have to change your ankle and hip and whatever joints. And even then, after a while, you might actually have to change all your skeletons and get a metal one, and even then. So it doesn't mean that we're not supposed to be happy. That's not it. Please don't misunderstand that. It is just simply stating the fact that even if we are happy, just know that that happiness is not eternal. That is why the provocative word suffering of change is put there. From a certain sense here, the Buddha's teachings are not using politically correct words because the students don't need to delude themselves more than they already are doing. So you could say, jointly challenged, is it? People, or skin-challenged people, or called wrinkly people. What is the difference? But if you want to be free from something, then you have to call a spade a spade. So that's why it's called suffering of change. Not only that, even if it is not painful nor pleasant, there's a name for that too: suffering of compounded nature. Just the fact that it is compounded, it is impermanent. Therefore, it is going to be suffering. As long as there is delusion, as long as there is running away from something and not relating to things just as they are, as long as there is ignorance, there is always accompanying other neuroses. And as long as they're there, it's suffering, even if you can't feel it now. So therefore, even if you reach certain mental states, complete stillness, quietness, From the Buddhist point of view, it's still dubious. Is it really freedom? Or are you still stoned on something a little bit more subtle? That's all. So all of these things that we are actually looking forward to has to change if one wants to follow this path. That is why our relation to space has to change. Not looking for a world where everything is paradisical, but mainly a world where the mind is not deluded, where it knows things just as they are, whether they are or not, knowing it just as it is. What it is, I think you will have to look further into teachings, such as the teachings on the emptiness aspect of the teachings of the Buddha and the luminous aspect of the teachings of the Buddha. Very often people think that Buddhist teachings, especially the minor teachings, is about emptiness. It is not. Because there's also so many teachings on the luminous aspect, the qualities of the Buddhas. Those are things that we need to study a bit more in order to really benefit from this. So, the Buddhist view is not about nothingness, and it is not about somethingness. It is something that is beyond all these extremes. So, how we relate to time, everything as impermanent, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing things. That doesn't mean that things are not pleasant, doesn't mean that everything is depressing. It actually means that we know what things are. You can go to a party, enjoy it, but also know that this party is not going to last 10 days, 10 years. It's going to change. That part is a very important part, that sanity part. So there is how we relate to our human life. We need to change, upgrade the values. How we relate to time and space has to be slightly different. And therefore, how we actually relate to this quiveriness. How we actually relate to this quiveriness in terms of not going for short-term, fix and developing and understanding what a long-term or actually what complete freedom from it might be. That is how we relate to it. And that is based on the idea, starting with the idea of law of cause and effect. So now the other part, the word of aspiration with advice. I'll just read the Tibetan.
Samadana Jada Lamadamba Kishin Junior Bottom, Kusum Tudu Jido Mo Shinji Labe, take patrol again and Jorban, Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, Jewan, Kusum Sobe Lama Gendu Namyan Yalam Dosowa, Koja Chungunero, Dojome Sujanda Teje, Junzen Narasumbana Ribene Gazan, Para Garden Chewe, Yunzen Dambani Shosasumje. 真去嘛为新年节出咋啦，咱们话嘞也就咋啦嘞，能不送去就能拿不到吧？多钱？人家那么当就这些也啥也咱们别都这我们这不懂。那个当那中间这边，咱们上面的这个每年的那东诶，我是东诶为是从说到了这网多这那这些厂方面东在广东啊。上方面的东啊，在那方啊，当上升个网络圈呢，现在是台湾的那边什么帮线，他把关的越来越不上，越来越不上啊，就网络圈了，那么当把那人呢，越不落到说没那么多啊，那帮线当今日将为当把什么到啊，那你别把这些人来接着。那么上一下那小东时间都不准的，就是那么多样子也搞了，每年前年结果等个人结果你给说的马路呗。电波的时间呢，偏把嘛就会讲说那个车吧，然后嘛就健康多呢，讲多的是结果多呢。那的偏远点多，那偏远点多，路边都是把那些那么这样呢，解决那么的工作会出现了啥的应该。人说了样的多没你当呢，你那么你讲，但就是这等等这个本身也搞成很多的，那么这边上面这边是主要嘛都会看给讲的本本给的。那么就这么一件事，当然嘛，这边俺都当到春节早啊，工作下班那么来送东当送东说东就在家了，而且今年没把它都什么应该当到都是都有对吧？都是这在为中那都讲把那个这样的当都是人就听到，这中当是那家当的都说这玩意可能东西了，这样的人都是什么的记录了是。这就是这把当中那个把原本的人。nam je no sama tonga te na tan do lo me se tsa me se ji chu do ma song ba zo lang do song ba jin de ne yun de de ja ba da ko la mi do sim ja na ni ja la ma la ko de e me je ta wa na mi yong wa zam chi de ja la ba chu de gun je ta ma ga de we ne ma ga we na sam ba sang bo ko na de xian lam do shu se tam je lam ge za wa yin be gong de zam la de zam le la be shu wa mang gun de ka tang den ju ja de bo da zi be特别人的人，英国这个老说啊，我让杨元的，让元的嘛，这就是那么就讲了，那种什么东西这个是，他每个人这边年度做过，就每家讲啥都话，但每种都在每个人都就会当这上你样打。老人的这嘛，这样看，这么英国这个来这么等人说那么多些，新都等把每个老百姓都话。Vedi nam giuda bodar curve sorrente su si come c'è la c'è sta c'è quando stende na we ci come da wa c'è ci ni ne ba la ma dan con giorno c'è son je tan la wa zo san le con lo c'è la ma le con to ron le ma lo c'è tam c'è ve stende ya c'è 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 sam lo da che me tu ba dan se je le zo 一边这是这帮也是上周三个就把了，你们在把这边也看不到，把这样现在我们可真不中呢，脏龙者做个生他们说个别车抗战的不管那看不出去。OK。
Okay, thank you so much, Rinpoche. We have now some time for the question and answers. So the first question, I'm going to read it here for the Zoom participants, and Dolma will read it for the on-site crew. So the first question is, when we have so many defense mechanisms and coping strategies, and as spoken about yesterday, even potentially our spiritual practice, how then can we identify when we are genuinely facing our true jitteriness and not simply contributing to our quote-unquote profile?
I'm afraid there's no fail-safe thing that we can chant and then everything is safe. I don't think that that is ever possible anyway. But the foundations that I was talking about, such as how we see, how we value our human lives, how we see, how we relate to time, how we relate to space, how we relate to our own emotions, how we relate to our experiences in life. Those are, I think, quite important. That's why I think in terms of our practices, the four thoughts and the preliminaries are actually called mundro, preliminary. They are things that have to be in place if we want to be able to be on the path, on a given path genuinely, then we require those preparations. So when we are looking into these coping mechanisms, what do we value? Am I valuing how I am seen in my profile? Imagine if we had these preparations done, then how long would it take to take a profile photo for your social media? I remember when people took photos of Khyentse Rinpoche and Khyentse Rinpoche, they would just go there and click. Khyentse Rinpoche and Khyentse Rinpoche never used to do this and do this, look at their teeth or anything like that, because their values were different. Their values were based on precious human life. Their values, the way they related to time, space, and their own environment was completely different. And these are not so difficult to study. They are not secret esoteric teaching. They are right here in front of us. The only difficulty is that they are not pre-digested, pre-cooked, and I don't know, what can we say, pre-swallowed and what is it? What? Not regurgitated, the other way.
Defecated.
Pre-defecated things. What we would like that, pre things. Like when we read the passages on impermanence, we think, oh, this is so not up to date to Western times, but actually up to date with deluded minds. It's just that these are not flyers that are that are here to impress us. These are actually just how things are. We see, what is it called? We get what we see. And the thing is, as somebody who is interested on this path, we really need to adapt ourselves to that. You know how in the past the teachings were given. In the past, in India, when the teachings were given, the teachers, some teachers, when the students went to see them, like one of the most well-known teachers called Gelugpa Naropa. Naropa was the most learned and famous dean of the famous University of Nalanda in India. He went seeking for a teacher. So he met Gelugpa. Gelugpa wasn't very attractive or, what can we say, people-friendly.
he was somebody living by the Ganges, surviving on fish gut. The thing is, he wasn't saying, come here, I will teach you and get you somewhere. I think, in a certain sense, Naropa might have felt that he was inconvenient to Tilopa. But Naropa really wanted Tilopa's wisdom. He wanted to really become free of this most chronic jitteriness. And he knew that there was nobody else but Tilopa who would teach him to get rid of that. He wasn't expecting Tilopa to sit there with a nice, shiny Colgate smile and then saying, trying to placate Naropa. Naropa realized the fate he was in. If he wanted to get rid of that, there was nobody else but Tilopa who could teach him. Then he adapted to Tilopa's way of teaching. Now, we don't have to do that much that moment. None of these texts will make us smell the smelliness or rot of the fish that Tilopa was eating. Naropa had to go there and serve him, be with him. I think Naropa spent 12 years before Tilopa gave him the teachings, for 12 years. So that kind of readiness is what we need. Just like many people, when we think of people having to work day and night to make a living, because if they don't, they know what will happen. They don't. Most people live in a country where there is, what is it called? The 𝘠𝘩, I thought that was called. The 𝘠𝘩. Well, I don't know what 𝘠𝘩 really is, but anyway, something called the 𝘠𝘩. So they have to work. Like in some restaurants, people come with flowers, try to sell to you. Like this balloon seller who was just taunting me by running across the window many times because he could hear me complain. They don't live in that kind of situation. So I think we really, if we want this, if we want to identify when we are genuinely facing our true jitteriness, then I think we really need to take support of the preliminaries, such as what actually is contemplating impermanence. How do we relate to impermanence? How do we relate to space, time? How are our values? We need to be able to question our values. When I mean question, I don't mean that we need to criticize our values, but our values need to be able to withstand scrutiny. And in that way, we need to be able to upgrade them. When we're able to do that, then we will be less and less prone to fooling ourselves. That is why all teachers, I remember when Khyentse Rinpoche used to teach us, he used to repeat this word, this line about the forethought, the suffering of samsara, law of cause and effect, impermanence, bodhicitta, over and over again, every day. It would take about at least 5 minutes of every teaching he was to give us.
At that time, I think I used to not appreciate it as much. I used to wake up when the subject of the teaching, today's thing, come up. Until then, I think it was sort of on autopilot. But he relentlessly would repeat that. And actually, every one of my teachers repeat that all the time. And whenever we used to talk to them, their conversations were always weaved through impermanence, a law of cause and effect, suffering of samsara. Everything of their conversation was weaved in that. There was always a perfume of that. There was always something like that. They used to talk about their own age, their own impermanence. We didn't like it, but at the same time, they did say that. And I think that's really important. Okay. What's the next?
Rinpoche, is there still time for another question?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So the next, and maybe I would say the last question for this session is the following. Is analysis of what we think is ourself, quote unquote, the way to transition our goals from seeking distraction to actually pursuing enlightenment?
Is analysis of what we think of ourselves.
Of what we think ourself is.
Oh, okay.
Is that the way to transition our goals from seeking just some form of distraction, or then pursuing higher goals, eventually enlightenment?
Is analysis of what we think of ourselves the way to transition our goals from seeking distraction to actually pursuing? Okay. I don't think it's just analysis of what we think is ourself. I think, first of all, what it is that we want, how we're going about it, our analysis of ourselves in general, our daily life. When you wake up in the morning, what do you first think? What do you say? You might think the first thing that might come off in my mouth is, I'm feeling so stunned. Or I didn't sleep well. I had a nightmare. My neighbor did this or did that. All of those things. And sometimes this is all we talk about. Sometimes we might think, oh, my mother, so-and-so, oh, last night and this morning and this evening. Or my brother, my father, my whatever. Basically, we are most of the time always complaining about something. And we almost act as if complaining in this way helps. And I think we genuinely believe that it helps. Not only that it helps, that we're entitled to being a complaining person. Complaining, entitled, self-obsessed. These are things that we need to notice. Why do we feel so entitled? If we look really, what is the purpose of it? We act as if that is going to bring happiness. Doesn't. And then along with that, of course, analyzing of what we think is ourselves. That is one of the things. And analyzing what we think of what we do, how we do things. These are all, I think, things that should be scrutinized. Of course, not all the time, but mainly when we are feeling so entitled, when we're feeling so
righteous, so right, which is actually most of the time. And then, of course, analyzing what we think of ourselves is also very important. Again, when we analyze what we think of ourselves, what does it mean? Like, I might think I'm so good looking. How do we analyze that? Maybe I might think I'm really good looking, but not good looking as that. Is that what we're talking about in terms of analysis? Or actually, when I think me, what is it actually? These are so many analyses possible. But I think we need to start with what is most pressing, and then slowly go to less pressing things. If we think that everything is always wrong, everyone is always wrong, wherever it is, then we might need to analyze that. Is really everyone wrong? Am I the only one that is right? And then sometimes we might feel so entitled. Why am I so entitled? These might be more pressing things that we need to analyze first. And then sometimes we might think, I'm so kind. I'm so loving. Then what are my conducts like? Are they really loving? I think these are quite pressing. And then eventually, absolutely, what we think of ourselves. The arguments that we have for positing what the self is, what we are, those are also, of course, very important. Because those things can actually help us really face not only the jitter, but the jitterer, not only the quivering, but the quiverer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rinpoche, for your time and your teachings. You're being so kind and gracious with offering this to us. I would like to now invite Dolma in the form of Zach Beer, the lead of our translation team, for a few closing remarks.
Just on behalf of the entire Khyentse Vision team, Rinpoche, thank you for these precious teachings. Thank you for showing us how to relate to our quivering, jittery hearts. Thank you for showing us how to take inspiration in Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo's profile. Thanks for showing us how to go beyond this world of short-term fixes. Please come back and teach us again and again, and live long.
So we will now conclude with the prayers, beginning with a long life prayer, Jigme Khyentse Rinpoche, and then some dedication prayers. So please join us for that. And at the end, also please stay. We will have some announcement for upcoming events.
Well, just give it back to Dom.
Shri, Shri, Shri. Buddha, boundless life, and Vidyadharas with power over life, deities and rishis of longevity, most speedily rain down great blessings of long life. Jigme, fearless Lord of life, we pray your feet stand firm. Om Amarani Jivantiye Swaha. Brum, brum, brum. Lady Ushnisha, victorious over enemies of life. 𝘒𝘩𝘢 and the other consorts, supreme companions in the secret practice of longevity. In this very instant prolong his stream of life, Jigme Khyentse, Lord of wisdom and of love, We pray your feet stand firm. Om Amrita Ayurtade Swaha. Tam, tam, tam. Mother of Buddhas, wish-fulfilling wheel and giver of longevity, Tserringma and your four sisters, and all other life protectors, utterly repel at once all danger to his life. Jigme, fearless and protecting Lord, we pray that you may perfectly stand firm. Om Tare Tuttare Ture Shri Brum Vajra Jnana Ayushe Swaha. Vimala Mitra, Chisong Deutsen, Sovereign Lord, Pema Ösel Dongag Lingpa, Pema Yeshe Dorje Heruka, Tashi Peljor, who was Padmasambhava himself, and Yeshe Dorje, to whom Padma gave his voice. Jigme Khyentse, you who are the very instrument whereby their wishes are fulfilled, may your life stand firm. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be free. Lord of the ocean of teachings in Tibet without bias, universal monarch of 7 wondrous transmissions, Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, Manjugosha in person, may all be auspicious for your lineage to spread and flourish. As long as space remains, as long as the world remains, may I too remain to alleviate the sufferings of the world.